Coming up, Alaska's big budget debate.
It communicates ideals, values, limits.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
Why it's inspired such poetry and passion.
Get an old truck or a new TV.
Even a song about the governor's promise to pay a $3,000 PFD.
Don't touch my PFD.
Don't touch my PFD.
Don't touch my PFD. I'm right with them.
If we had a surplus of funds that we could support this, then that makes sense, but we don't.
Ahead, the PFD debate. Yours, mine, or ours?
Don't touch my PFD.
Alaska, where there are old triumphs, but also new frontiers, with challenges as great as the state itself, but a belief that the best is yet to come. Bringing you the faces, the places, and the spirit of the last frontier. This is Frontiers with Rhonda McBride.
Welcome to Frontiers. So far, the legislature has avoided a showdown with the governor, but it's coming, and the size of your permanent fund dividend check will be at the heart of the battle. Will it be the $3,000 the governor promised on the campaign trail, along with more than $1 billion in budget cuts? For many Alaskans, not an easy trade-off.
Whoa, whoa, whoa,
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
You know it's springtime in Alaska
What are you guys up to? 2 of them?
when the dogs are back on the grill. And Hurricane Dave gets ready to entertain the tourists.
All right, gang, one more time, then we're all going to LA. We're going to put this on record. We're all going to be rich. We're going to be stars.
Students on a break from a Covenant House class join in.
Whoa, whoa, whoa,
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Don't touch my PFD.
Don't touch my PFD.
Don't Touch My PFD, a new song that hatched over the winter.
Don't touch my PFD.
Don't touch my PFD.
One of Dave's Alaska tunes, just like his license plate says. Who is this song dedicated to?
Governor Dunleavy. But truthfully, it's dedicated to everybody in Alaska who has a stake in this.
Sam, what can I start for you right now?
Fathers like Andreas Gorderas,
It's a beautiful day today, all right?
who likes to spend his dividend on his son.
I like to save it. I'm a saver. Because you never know when you're going to need it for a rainy day.
We get a big fat check once a year. Just because we live up here.
As the showdown in Juneau is about to begin over the size of the PFD, Alaskans are ready to jump in the fray. So what do you think people's attitude is towards the PFD?
Oh, give it to me, please, as much as you can. Why not?
Michael Grew's dog is named Lucky and says we're lucky dogs to get that dividend. Still, he wonders if the money would be better spent on education and infrastructure.
And if you don't invest in those things, what future does this state have? It seems quite dire to me.
It makes me sad that we can't come together more, because I feel like there's a common ground for us. And I don't think we've found that yet, and I feel like this governor is just pretty extreme, and that there's a better way.
Some want to take part of it away. The state, it seems, has bills to pay. Lazy politicians cast an eye, stick their fingers in the pie. The last governor gave it a whack. The new gov says he's gonna pay it back. Whoa, whoa, whoa,
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
You'll find plenty of Alaskans with the same sentiments sung in this anthem for the PFD.
It really helps the state's economy, gets it out of the hands of the legislators where they can spend it on basically crony capitalism, I guess.
As for lazy government, no, I don't support that. I don't support lazy government.
Now we're in the midst of a nasty fight in a state that leans just to the right. The crazy irony is this: nothing more socialist.
Instead of socialist, substitute owner state.
We're killing the goose that's laying the golden egg. We're killing it.
Jack Hickel ought to know. His father, the late Governor Wally Hickel, popularized the term owner state and the belief that Alaskans equally own the resources of our state.
We've got to protect the dividend more than anything else. That is the most crucial financial issue facing our state right now, because it's our children's and grandchildren's savings account, isn't it? It's their rightful share of the resources.
Jack Hickel says the legislature needs to pay Alaskans their full dividend.
We support Dunleavy in protecting the dividend and protecting the fund.
However, Hickel says the governor should put all of the tools on the table, like new taxes.
The bottom line is it's not their money to spend. They need to look down the road at a broader picture. So for them to say it's pay a dividend or cut education, that's a false choice. It's not real, nor is it right.
But definitely, it's a fight.
The song has a little something for everybody. You can either take it as a serious song, or you can take it as satire, or you can take it as a little bit of both. And somewhere in there lies a solution.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
Don't touch my PFD.
Don't touch my PFD.
Don't touch my PFD.
Up next, from songs to poems.
I know the word budget doesn't sound sexy, but it's actually one of the most romantic things a leader makes.
When we come back, Christine Nami Erickson's love letter to Alaska and a message to lawmakers in a video poem. And Tim Bradner and Larry Pursley will give us a status report on the budget as the session hits the 90-day mark. Normally, Alaskans zone out when there's talk about the state budget. It's, well, just not sexy. But a Juneau poet recently described it as the most romantic thing a leader does.
Sentiment matters. I saw a meme recently that said, "I wish Americans loved America the way Alaskans love Alaska." You can't know a hunter.
Christine Nami Erickson says in her love letter to Alaska that when it comes down to it, a budget is all about love. She says a governor's budget communicates to Alaskans who is wanted and who is needed. And when the governor preserves tax credits for the oil and gas industry, she says it's a way to say that the industry is wanted and needed. And when programs are cut, that says something too.
But when he suggests there is not enough, and he cuts senior benefits and he raises fees, he says to our elders, "We want you, but we don't need you." When he cuts Medicaid and low-income dental care, he says to our poor and to our sick, "We don't need you." When he cuts the marine highway system that connects our rural communities, he says to our villages, "We don't need you." When he sheds Head Start, Bright Beginnings, pre-K, when he slashes K-12 education and the University of Alaska system, he says to our young people, to our youth, "We don't need you." But in our Alaska, we belong to each other. Maybe it's the poetry of our geography.
In her poem, Erickson calls on lawmakers to take good care of their state so Alaskans can take care of each other. She also asks Alaskans to support lawmakers because in the end, they will have to balance what Alaskans really want with what they really need. And that will take courage. The poem was put to video by Ryan Cortez Perez, a Juneau producer with Gemini Waltz Media. So far, the video has had more than 11,000 views on YouTube. The governor's office said that he has not had the opportunity to view this video, but he appreciates all the engagement and discussion that has come about as a result of his permanent fiscal plan. He says people have every right to voice their opinion, and he thinks it's an important part of the American process. Well, I want to ask our guests for this show, Tim Bradner and Larry Pursley, what they make of this video, the public's overall interest in the budget. Tim with the Alaska Legislative Digest, Larry, a columnist and former Deputy Commissioner of Revenue. Larry, You saw the video. What do you think about it?
It was excellent. I'll vote for her. It was good. It was heartfelt. It was sincere, and it gets to the point that people who are frustrated with the governor's budget are kind of wondering, what were you trying to tell us with this budget? He's saying, well, I don't want to talk about taxes. Not going to talk about taxes. Not going to talk about a reduced dividend. It's either a fat dividend money in your pocket or schools. It's a false choice he created, and I thought she captured it well.
Tim, have we ever seen this kind of outpouring, songs about the PFD, a poem about the budget? What does it say?
Well, I mean, to give the governor a little bit of credit here, I mean, he's right. This has really engaged Alaskans in a discussion. We haven't seen this kind of a conversation about this stuff ever, I don't think. And I think what's brought it out is just the severity and the scale of the cuts he proposes, like 1/4 of the operating budget, balanced against this giant PFD that he's talked about.
Looks like the legislature, though, is kind of ignoring him. And, the House has passed its operating budget. It didn't include anything about the PFD. What's going on with that?
Well, my impression is they didn't do that because they want to have a side conversation about the PFD. That'll be a separate bill, they say, because they may want to change the formula which is being talked about in the Senate. So I think it's appropriate. The budget was focused on the things that they spend money on in the programs. And I wouldn't really read too much into the fact that it didn't include the PFD.
No, they wanted to get the operating budget out of the House to the Senate so the Senate can work on it, so they can go to conference committee. That's important to the schedule, important to the calendar. The amount of the dividend, as Tim said, side argument, you can do that later. Let's move the budget.
So why is the calendar important? Because, we're probably going to see special sessions. Is it important to get the budget taken care of ASAP?
I think it is in this case, particularly in this case. And they've moved very quickly. It was pointed out in the press conference by the House majority this morning that they've gotten the budget out of the House almost in record time, despite the fact that they organized 30 days late.
And why are they doing that?
I think they want to move it quickly to the Senate. The Senate can move it quickly back, and I think they want to take advantage of this procedure where they can get to the budget early, to the governor early. So he has to make vetoes before they leave town.
Right, and then there's a deadline. Once he vetoes, he has X number of days to make his veto decision. They've got to respond. They don't want to drag this out to the very end of the fiscal year in June, where people aren't sure what's going to happen July 1. They don't want to be like a federal government.
Well, let's look at what the PFD proposal is. Governor has proposed $3,000, and then we're hearing that the House is looking at in the neighborhood of a $1,300 PFD. So they're way off from each other. What's going to happen with that?
Well, I think that what the House says is that their budget, which funds most of, as they describe, the core programs of the government, there's still enough money left for a $1,300 dividend. Now, the Senate has to weigh in on this. We don't know what their budget will total and what they'll propose for a PFD dividend. But this is obviously less than half of what the governor has promised.
I think it's going to come down to a negotiation with the governor. There are some who say even the $1,300 is too high because they want to put some spending back in. They don't want to overdraw from the permanent fund earnings. They don't want to take more money from savings. So I think it's just going to come down to some sort of political negotiations between the legislature and the governor, because whether it's $1,300, $1,500, $1,100, he's promised everyone $3,100 come heck or high water.
Now, one thing we should talk about is what's going on the Senate side. They're grappling with how we calculate the dividend, because the legislature passed a bill that gave us a percent of market value formula to follow. They're looking at perhaps also having a constitutional amendment specifying a 50-50 split of the dividend between the public, individuals, and state government.
Well, Rhonda, I think what the Senate's actually thinking of is a statute, a bill that would enshrine the 50% share in the percentage of market value draw.
But there's also a discussion about putting it in the Constitution.
That's the governor's proposal, and that's in the House too. But the Senate would rather start with a statute, as they describe it. They'd rather make a trial run with this thing to see how it works before really talking about putting it in the Constitution.
And I think 50-50, the statutory provision that Tim refers to, was just kind of thrown out there by the Senate as a placeholder. I don't think there's overwhelming support in the Senate for 50-50. I think many senators feel that is too rich of a split in terms of individual dividends, more than the state can afford if people want schools, village public safety officers, public defenders, senior benefits, and all the rest.
If you take 50% of the percentage draw from the Permanent Fund, it'll mean less for the budget. So it does create a budget problem for us.
So is it a good idea to put the draw in stone?
In stone, you mean the Constitution? Or
in the Constitution?
A lot of people think not. I mean, the Constitution is not set up for that kind of specific amounts of cash allocations.
Yeah.
The Constitution has sort of general statements of values, like you will support public education, you'll support public safety, health and social services. It doesn't say you'll spend X amount for a dividend. It shouldn't say a lot of that.
As long as we are wholly dependent on oil, because we have no other taxes to speak of in the state, sure, oil's $70 these days. We've seen it at $26 not that long ago. I think we're so dependent on that one source of revenue. If you put the amount of the dividend or the allocation for the dividend in the Constitution, you could face a year where it's just a miserable fiscal mess.
All right, well, I want to thank both of you for being with us, and you'll be back, so stay here. And up next, how the governor is ready to pull out the stops to protect the dividend.
We can veto the budget, we can call special sessions.
Some of the battle lines about to be drawn as the governor prepares to go head-to-head with lawmakers. The governor drew the lines in the sand this week. He threatened budget vetoes and special sessions if lawmakers don't get to work on his proposed constitutional amendments. One that would require voter approval of new taxes, another that would enshrine the traditional formula for the permanent fund dividend, and a third that would tighten the existing constitutional spending cap. If the legislature approves these measures, they would go to a vote of the people.
If we know they want that, then we can have a permanent fiscal fix. If not, we're always wondering if what we did is what the people want, and we're always subject to the people backdooring us, as one would say, in terms of initiatives or repeals.
The governor said he's concerned that his amendments have stalled in the House. And back with us, Tim Bradner, Larry Pursley. You know, this is kind of interesting, you know, that we have him focusing not on the PFD immediately, but on his constitutional amendments. What do you think about that? That this is the hammer that he's using right now?
Tim, you can talk about hammers. I'll talk about pliers.
Well, we do know that he's been down in this last week and visiting with legislative leaders, which is interesting. We also discovered he's actually going down to their offices. In one case with Lieutenant Governor Meyer. And what's interesting about that is that governors normally don't go to legislators' offices. The tradition is that they come to his office. So here we have him going out. He must be worried about his amendments. He must be pretty worried about his agenda. And according to kind of what we're hearing is that in his private conversations with legislators, we're hearing reports that he appears, this is just a strategy, he appears more flexible and more willing to negotiate than he appears to be in his public comments. But I don't know how to really read that. What do you think?
And also, we need a budget this year. Even if they pass a constitutional amendment in the legislature this year, it wouldn't go to voters until November 2020. So he's got a year. In that, I think it's easier for him to say, well, constitutional amendments can only go to the ballot to voters in the next general election, which is November 2020. So if they don't act on his proposed amendments this year, they could do it next year, still get it on the next ballot. It gives him a little wiggle room as to his strategy. I don't know. So
what amendments do you think of those three stand the best chance of passage?
Passage of the public or passage of the legislature?
Passage of the legislature, because they've got to pass it to get it onto the ballot. And I guess the voters are another question there.
Well, I don't think there's any support for the vote of the people on taxes in the legislature. That's really an unworkable model.
And why is that going to get headwinds?
I don't think it will get headwinds.
Yeah, it's irresponsible.
I mean, that's what I mean, is it's going to get guff.
It's the legislature's not going to pass it, but if it ever actually got in the ballot, it would probably get approved.
Yeah, that's why they wouldn't pass it.
That's why they don't want it.
Of the three, the only one that there's a prayer of the legislature putting on the ballot is a constitutional spending limit. And the debate there will be, how's it function? Is it population? Is it inflation? How do you deal with emergencies? But I don't see any great interest. I don't see it possible that 2/3 of the legislature will put either the constitutional amendment for no taxes or a dividend on the ballot.
Well, they're far apart on a lot of other things,
Sure.
and of course he can't raise the dividend. He can only trim what the legislature puts in their budget. So how are these bargaining chips going to play out?
Rhonda, one consideration is, as you mentioned, the legislature is the appropriator. The governor cannot introduce a permanent fund dividend. I mean, he can introduce a bill, but he can't approve it. So the legislature has a lot of leverage. He can veto their budget, but if they don't provide for a dividend, there's nothing he can do. They have to approve it, whatever the amount is.
You talk about how's it going to play out. There's going to be bluster. There's going to be threats. There's going to be brinksmanship, press releases. I don't know, sometime in June we'll know how much the dividend and school funding is.
Or August.
So is this a healthy process in your view?
Oh, no, but it's the one we have, and we're
stuck with.
And a lot of states go through this kind of thing.
Yeah, Illinois went without a budget for a couple years, so no, it's not healthy, but it's where this country has gone politically, where people get so polarized and so entrenched. In Alaska, it's just so much about the damn dividend. It drives everything. And Dunleavy got elected on that, smart guy, picking an issue, but it's not healthy.
It's coming back. It'll come back to haunt him. One real practical problem this kind of debate causes is that local governments and school districts have to set budgets. Like the mayor of the Mat-Su has got to have a budget this month to take to the assembly. What's he going to do? And what they have to do is they have to make a worst case scenario as a contingency.
Well, we've got about a minute left, Larry, and we've got one monkey wrench that's popped up is, the governor's attorney general is saying, that what the legislature voted on a year ago to forward fund education could be unconstitutional.
Sure, this was the same attorney before he became AG who represented the Kenai Peninsula Borough and told them that their prayer before borough assembly meetings was legal, was constitutional. The court said no, so it's just his opinion.
All right, well, we're going to have to leave the discussion here, but it'll continue. Well, we're going to leave you now with Hurricane Dave, and an impromptu group of Covenant House students literally pulls off the sidewalks to sing along. Now, there is a recording of Dave's song, Don't Touch My PFD. You can go to hurricanedavemusic.com for more about that. We'll want to thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week.
We get a big fat check once a year just because we live up here. How you spend it don't matter to me. Get an old truck or a new TV. You can improve the way you live, or just pick, click, give. Whoa, 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 whoa. Don't touch my PFD.
Don't touch my PFD.